Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me today I have Brad. How are you, Brad?
Good yourself?
Yeah, very good, very good.
That's
It was
good.
it was an unfortunate result on the weekend, however, for City. We had a great win midweek last week against Preston, and then typical City, we go to the bottom club in the league, 17 games without a win, and we come away with a 3-1 defeat. So, uh, I guess, it's been a great run of form that the side's been on, and it's not to say that that's suddenly come to an end, but is it concerning at all from your point of view at the manner of the loss, or is it just sort of one of those blips on the road?
Um, well, like you said at the start, it's something we're getting used to at times. But I think probably as much as everyone's in the same boat, we still probably uh, looked a bit slow, looked like we were second to the ball a lot, and probably didn't have that. I don't know whether it's just the quality over the whole week to run effectively three teams in the week.
Yeah,
And that still seems to be the factor. And I mean, look, to be fair to the manager and the players, you still look through that team sheet, and other than the obvious sort of Bowen Irvine, combinations, it's still only half a season old, not even.
yeah.
So you know what it's like in this division, mate. You've got to get bogged in, play a lot of games in a lot of pressure situations, and we've still got guys finding their feet.
I mean,
So that's the only positive I can take out of it at the moment.
yeah, I mean, you look back on that season under Bruce, it was at 15, 16 when we went up, but we would typically have those sorts of midweek games where guys like Diami, Huddleston, Hernandez even, who looked really sluggish midweek after we'd knock off a side 3-0, 4-0 on the weekend, and then we'd have a 1-1 draw or we'd lose the game during the week because, like you're saying, to effectively get these guys to be playing three games in a week is pretty tough, and that's seasoned professionals. And now we've got a side that's, pretty much half or more young players. You look at your Lopez, who's 21, I think, or 20.
Mm.
Keen Lewis Potter, who came off the bench, got his first senior goal, which was fantastic to see. Bowen's not that old himself. He's 22. So as much as we sort of put a lot of pressure on his shoulders because of his goal scoring record, he's only a couple of seasons into his senior career, and those the year upon year of pre-season and fitness and so on hasn't had an effect to that extent yet, and these guys just can't back up three games in a week potentially.
And you probably, even just going back to that 15, 16 side, that's probably the difference still. Back then we had what we would think now is almost two starting 11s
Yeah,
in the squad. There was guys like, Aluko not getting a run, and
Luco,
we had you had young guys pushing
Myler,
up.
yeah,
That's obviously when Maguire was finding his feet.
yeah,
We had guys knocking down the door.
yeah,
Um, and whereas at the moment we're sort of trying to manage ourselves through a week. It's
yeah.
still a different mindset to them. But having said that, you've got to take the good with the bad. The Preston result was great. It shows that when we're on song, we're on song. The problem is to end up in that top four, top six. This is where you just put Barnsley away every week, and
It
that's
is.
still our failings from the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, that is right. And we don't have that consistency yet to call ourselves a top six side. But it is funny if you reverse the results, if you said we'd come away with a 3-1 defeat to Preston and we'd smashed Barnsley 4-0, you'd probably say that's a great set of results,
Yeah,
Yeah, you take
yeah.
the 3-1 loss to Preston, they're a good side, what have you. But cool, look, we went and put away Barnsley. So it's funny that when you flip the results, it kind of tells a different picture, but then at the same time you'd be saying, well, we're still that little bit off the top six because we can't beat a side like Preston. So it's that consistency that we need. I guess the main positive from the game you sort of touched on there, that in the past we've had young players pushing for a start, and we do have a few at the moment as well, particularly in the form of Keen Lewis Potter, who became the first Hull-born player to score a goal for us since 2011, which was Nick Barmby scoring in that season. So it's kind of funny when you look back on, yes, we've had quite a few academy products come through the side, and obviously Jared Bowen, the most predominant of those, isn't Hull-born. Um, there hasn't been another Hull-born player who scored a league goal for us in that time. I think Josh Tyman scored a goal in the League Cup, but yeah, no one in the league.
Oh, okay, no, that's good. That's good stat, mate. You've done your homework well.
Yeah, I think I have to credit. It was Phil Buckingham I saw tweeted that one out this morning, so I'll pinch
Okay.
that one off him. But it's still quite remarkable. And look, it's great to see. Hopefully, another natural goal scorer emerge from the reserves or the academy, and this time,
Mm.
one who's really truly Hull born, which could really sort of be someone that the supporters identify with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on from that that pretty disappointing defeat to Barnsley. We'll look ahead, hopefully, to better signs this weekend against Stoke in a similar sort of position to Barnsley. They've had, I think it's 3 losses in their last 5 games. So really, look, they've sacked Nathan Jones, their manager. They've brought in Michael O'Neill, the I think still current Northern Ireland manager. So you don't see that too often where there's a manager juggling international and domestic football.
Mm.
And they've had a couple of results. You kind of get that new manager bounce, but nothing to say that they've really turned a corner and they've really started to improve.
No, and I think probably the only danger there is they're obviously down the bottom, similar to Barnsley. And looking through some of the results that Stoke had, obviously they beat Barnsley, so that's a good start. But even against Blackburn, I think they lost 3-2 or 2-1, the same as Barnsley did. Um, they only lost to 1-0 to Cardiff. Like, you know what it's like in this
Yeah.
division. We still go on about that the bottom team could beat the top team on its day. Um, it's just one of those ones where we've got to say, well, look, we've got to prove to the manager that last week was a blip. We're playing at home. We've had a week, normal week, you would hope, between matches. Um, Fingers crossed, pretty much the first full strength 11 for the fortnight, and no excuses.
And look, I guess Stoke are a different kettle of fish to Barnsley in that they've actually got quite a good squad of players. It's just that they don't
Mm.
seem to be performing this season. You look, they've still got their Joe Allen in the side. Someone that we know very well is Sam Clucas, who will be returning to the KCOM. There are quality players in that side who on their day can turn it on and produce quite a strong result. So it's a team that we'd be very wary of.
Yeah, I think if I look, it's not that we should be arrogant or overconfident. If we're playing away, I'd have a real fear, um, just because obviously going to Stoke's not great at the best of times. But um, I just think that this is the one where, unfortunately for Stoke, we got our pants pulled down and we've got to turn it around.
Is there any major changes to the side that you'd make? Would you, for instance, look at a Keane Lewis Potter and say he's full of confidence, he's just scored his first goal, he'd be itching to go? Would you throw him in from the start against Stoke and see what he does with a start?
Um, Look, I'm still not sure. I still think yes, it would be a great, you know, fairy tale for him to start and so on. But I also think as well that we've basically got to look at what is this team that is going to drive us up the table in the second half, and we have got a bit of quality in that squad. There is guys that should be fighting for their spots. But having said that, I don't think up until Barnsley on the weekend we thought we had too much problems.
Yeah,
Um, I still think that if you look at the way Bowen plays as well, he does benefit more being able to be a bit freewheel and free spirited rather than having to be, let's say the number 2 forward.
yeah.
Well, even though he's our number 1 forward. But yeah, look, I think it depends as well on what learnings we got from the weekend. Clearly, Barnsley opened us up in that second half when maybe we thought it was just going to happen. And so maybe from the manager's perspective, the one thing that I did notice, and bear in mind it wasn't the whole game, but Lewis Potter did do a lot of running.
Yeah.
And if we're really trying to say, look, defensively over the whole pitch, you've got to start pulling your socks up and playing that team game like we saw Irvine do earlier in the year, getting a long way back and helping out, then maybe that's the week to start it. But it'd be interesting to see. I don't think the manager's probably even got it 100% set yet either.
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate one because we looked so good against Preston. A lot of people would have said that's clearly our best 11. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, from that side, McGuinness has suffered a hamstring injury, so he's out for a little while. Kevin Stewart's also out until February, I believe, which is a pretty awful turn of events. Although, silver lining of that being he hasn't been as vital a player in the last couple of months as he was at the start of the season. Um,
Mm.
But it does mean that we're basically down to our bare bones up forward with Eves really our sole striker. I think Bullock is still injured as well. I haven't really heard a whole lot about him in recent weeks. So it does sort of limit our options there. I mean, obviously the other alternative is the formation that we had tried recently of Bowen up top on his own essentially, and Bowler and Grzycki out wide.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something about that didn't sit. Is that Bowen seems to be, you look at he does his best work almost just outside the box.
Yeah,
And I felt sometimes that when he was leading the line, he really is, he's almost too deep for where you want him to be. You want him to be able to turn those defenders inside out at pace. We know he can still get to the back stick and can still do all his usual, forward prowess that he's got. But I don't know, just even looking at the way that lined up, Irvine looked like he was playing very defensively, whereas even up until the Preston game, there's times there where Irvine, Grzycki, they were playing really good balls almost sideways and turning defenders inside and out. I just feel like Bowen right up the top on his own's not the answer. And it almost looked like sort of Honeyman was playing a pseudo forwards role as well. It just didn't seem to quite fit.
yeah, yeah. It looked like perhaps he was looking for answers after the McGuinness injury.
Yeah,
Considering that in that Preston game we had McGuinness up top, and then as you're saying, Bowen in that sort of free role behind him, which gave him a lot more freedom to do his thing. Which I agree. I sort of when you've got a player in that sort of form, you just say to them, you know where the ball is, you know where the goal is. Just do your thing. Just run where you need to be to put the ball in the back of the net.
yeah, and I mean, I know it's a little bit different with some of the changes that were made, but I can't help but think as well that Bowen would play better off someone like Eves and not being that focal point, and then that would have pushed that midfield back into what I would say is a normal formation. But certainly, if there was patches against Barnsley where Irvine looked like he was playing the holding role
Right. Yeah.
and just didn't look. I'm not saying it was intended to be that way because we know he does track back when he needs to, but it was almost like this pseudo 4-4-2, but Honeyman's up there and Irvine's back, and it just didn't seem to fit. And again, that gets back to the cattle. If we haven't got a good spread across the whole pitch, I mean, if you look at a couple of options we had on the bench, certainly when Eves came on and Lewis Potter came on, it did change the way that worked a little bit.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Um, do you have a score prediction for this one?
um, I just have this feeling that we will actually bounce and just do them 2-0. I think we'll get our back four. Will be, I think our lineup will be back to what we think it should be. And with that in mind, I think probably the most disappointing thing against Barnsley is we're against the bottom side, and I don't even know, other than the goal, if we had a shot on target.
Yeah.
And that's just got to turn around. I think defensively, I know we conceded 3, and that looks bad, but really it was 2, let's say. And our defence has been very resilient this year. I think we will make it tough for them. We've just got to get our goal scorers back up in the right spots.
Yeah, it seems, if we have our next away game midweek next week, which we'll cover at the start of next week, but if in our next away game we similarly struggle, I guess it's against Leeds, so it's a little bit different. But Middlesbrough, Barnsley, both away games where we really struggled. Middlesbrough, we were fortunate to get that red card to sort of turn the tide in our favour, but we've really struggled away from home in recent times. I'm not as confident as you at home. I think we'll probably scrape past 2-1 potentially. I think they will score a goal. But look, if we can get a 2-0, 3-0 sort of win and get back to winning ways, I think that would be fantastic indeed. Um,
Mm.
just before we head off, our football flashback of the week is against the opponent that we have next week, Leeds. Around this time, back in the 2012-13 season, we had a fantastic 2-0 win against Leeds, which was actually our first league double over Leeds in about 35 years, 30, no, 25 years it was. My maths is not great. 1987-88 season, so 25 years. Um, Under Steve Bruce, the season that we were to go on and get promoted, my memory of looking back on that game was it was almost the best game that we played that season. We had bigger wins that season, but the football that we played against Leeds that day was phenomenal, and we scored 2 goals in the second half from Corey Evans and David Myler, about 3 or 4 minutes apart. And it's interesting looking at the lineup that day. I have a feeling it must have been. Uh, I'm not actually even sure why it was Jakupovic in goal for that game, but it was Jakupovic in goal, which was kind of funny seeing him in that lineup, considering he wouldn't really capture a spot in the team for another couple of seasons under Marco Silva. But then we had Chester, Fye, Hobbs as our back three, Brady Elmo as our fullbacks or our wing-backs, midfield of Evans, Myler, Corrin, Quinn, and then Aluko up top. So it was sort of that quintessential championship team where we were able to knock off the Leeds side for the second time that season. Do you have any memories of this one?
Look, not many, but I do remember we played at home, and I thought it was Boxing Day, but it definitely wasn't Boxing Day. It was around that time where you play a whole heap of games in 2 weeks. But if I remember, it was probably the first time I realised how good Robbie Brady was.
Yep.
And I think it was, if I remember, I think we got 3 or 4 corners in a row where he was taking them, obviously, and just whipping them in. To be honest, I didn't even know who David Myler was, other than we got him from Sunderland, I think, and that's all I knew. But it was probably one of those ones, like we've seen before with, and I'm going back even further here, when John Parkin, I think, scored against Leeds.
Oh,
I know Windass did. One of the two big boys did. It just means more than anything. And probably the only time that I love beating them is when we're not expected to. People write us off as, oh, yeah, Leeds are top and whatever. Well, if we stuff them next week, it's going to look even better and feel pretty good around town anyway. So at this point in time, I don't remember the game a lot. I do remember it was one of my least favourite kits, if I remember. It was one of the Adidas ones. It was a bit boring. I think we had a good away kit that year, but not such a good home kit. But no, I mean, it's always pretty special. And I remember going back even before some of the forums and all those sorts of things started, the Leeds away games where, they're going to bust the supporters in and you can't get in unless you've got a ticket and you've got to leave. All that sort of stuff from afar was really cool to listen to and just made you want to beat them 10 times more. So I don't remember that specific game too much, but I would imagine, knowing that it was Leeds, we would have had a good crowd, and to beat them in front of a good crowd is always a good thing.
Well, I'll tell you, I think you've got a better memory than you're giving yourself credit for, because that David Myler header was in fact from a Robbie Brady corner.
Oh, well, I'll take that.
Yeah, it was a very specific.
Did you say David Myler header?
Yes, it was a header.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
very rare one.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was the games between Boxing Day and New Year's. So it was, I think there would have been a game on Boxing Day, and then this was a couple of days later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, as you're saying, the wins against Leeds when it's unexpected, which similar to the win that we had last season against them by the same scoreline, are always a bit sweeter, and it's sort of shaping up that way next week. That all the odds are against us. They're in fantastic form, flying at the top of the table, and if we're to go there and knock them off, I think it would be fantastic. But of course, we'll talk about that a little bit more next week after the Stoke result, which hopefully will see us bank the 3 points and get a bit of form back under our legs and give us a bit more energy and motivation beating Leeds. But until next week, thanks for joining me, Brad.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And thank you everyone for listening in. It will be an extra special episode next week. It will be our 100th episode of the Tigers Down Under, so make sure that you tune in for that one. And until then, come on City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're out.